I think Anna's completely right. And if we look at some of the other races, I mean, you look at New Jersey gubernatorial, which went from +3 to +15. You look at Virginia, which went from Youngkin winning by, I think it was 1.8 to +15 for Abigail Spanberger. There's a lesson for Republicans. If they don't want to learn it, that's completely fine with me. But there was talk of 40 seats maybe in the House and 26 flipping.
In today's video, David Pakman destroys the MAGA pundits on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. David Pakman and Abby Phillip jump straight in, calling out the MAGA guests for dodging facts on everything, from the GOP's weakening grip into key districts to Trump's messy record on the economy and that controversial double tap strike. While the MAGA commentators lean on buzzwords and deflection, David Pakman and Abby Phillip keep dragging the conversation back to reality with receipts, context, and real policy questions the guests can't answer. So let's dive in and watch how David Pakman shuts down the MAGA pundits on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
It could be 60, it could be 70. I mean, this could be a disaster next year.
I also wonder, the redistricting part of this, I think Republicans clearly want to redistrict their way out of electoral problems next year. But if they make a bunch of districts sort of like moderately red and get rid of blue districts, I'm not sure that's really going to be the panacea that they think it is.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of messages here that might, if you're in Indiana, for example, you're probably like, I don't really know about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trying to make yourself impervious to defeat is a bad strategy because everyone knows what you're doing. The doubts among Democrats don't really matter much. Those are to be expected. The growing doubt and discomfort among independents, that is a deep concern. The fact that a lot of Republicans are beginning to ask real questions, like what is the deal here? The terrorists were supposed to do particular things, is perhaps the biggest concern. I think you can read the tea leaves in a bunch of different ways. You can see all manner of shapes in the clouds, and you can read it in ways that are good for Democrats or bad for Republicans. But I think however multidimensional all of this is, there are fewer and fewer universes in which this doesn't start to look like Donald Trump being somewhat of a drag on his party, whereas before he was undeniably the wind in the party's sails. It's not clear who else could be the standard bearer for the party, but it is clear that there are real questions about his ability to lead the party into the future and past the midterms.
Well, the midterms are always tough for the president's party in power. They're always a real challenge. The question is whether we're looking at a midterm that looks more like 2018 or one that looks like 1998. 1998, Bill Clinton actually gained a few seats because voters became convinced that his opposition party, the Republicans, were only out to get Bill Clinton. And so if swing voters this year decide that Democrats really don't have what's in the best interest of the American people at heart and that all they really want to do is impeach Donald Trump, I think Democrats could way undershoot their potential.
I am curious about what you think, where you think the evidence is that this is a 1998 election. But I also...
It didn't look like it looked until the end.
Well, I just think that all the available evidence suggests that voters are souring on Trump specifically, that they actually want checks and balances on him, that they think that he's not doing what he promised to do. And then one of the reasons that they think that is because of things like this that he said earlier today, talking about how, I guess, the word affordability, perhaps like groceries, is something of a hoax. Listen.
There's this fake narrative that the Democrats talk about, affordability. They just say the word. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. You just say it. Affordability. I inherited the worst inflation in history. There was no affordability. Nobody could afford anything. The word affordability is a con job by the Democrats.
Okay, I mean, listen, I'll just acknowledge last night you were very clear that he needs to take this seriously, but he seems to think that this is like all of the other things that he calls hoaxes, and that if he just labels it as such, that it'll just go away.
When Abby Phillip pushes back on Brad Todd here, she's pointing towards something Republicans really don't want to confront. The numbers don't lie, and the trend lines aren't moving in their direction. And honestly, you don't even need partisan framing to see it. Independent polls from Pew and Gallup have been showing for well over a year that swing state suburban voters, once a reliable Republican cushion, have been drifting away from the GOP, not because they've suddenly become liberals, but because they're exhausted with Trump-driven chaos. That's the part Brad Todd keeps dodging. Take the whole redistricting will save us argument. Sure, Republicans can redraw maps to make some districts safely red, but they've already hit the ceiling in a lot of states. Even the conservative-leaning Cook Political Report has said the GOP is running out of map manipulation runway. You can't gerrymander your way out of a national mood shift, especially when Trump is consistently underwater with independents by double digits. And since Brad brings up 1998, that analogy completely falls apart when you look at the context. Clinton had a 60% approval rating heading into those midterms. Trump never came close to that, not even on his best day. You simply can't copy-paste a historical outlier onto a political environment where the leading figure of your party is polling in the low 40s and facing widespread voter fatigue. Abby's point is rooted in actual data. Voters want balance, they want stability, and they're increasingly skeptical of Trump's grip on the GOP. Brad's just trying to wish that reality away.
Okay, I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying you cannot tell people that the problems they're experiencing in their pocketbooks are fake. Like, that's just a bad strategy. However, it is also the case that wages have kept up with inflation. In fact, they have outpaced them. It is also the case that prices in some industries are going down. And it is the case that the economy is generally good. So there's a mystery here, which is, why does consumer sentiment feel so bad? Why do Americans feel like things are so bad? Now, Joe Biden made the mistake of trying to do exactly what I just did and lecture
literally,
people.
In fact, quite literally, all of those statistics were things that they would point
However,
to a year ago today.
at the same time, you have to look at things and say, okay, what can the president do? What can he take responsibility for? And what can't he? You don't actually want a certain degree of deflation because, of course, that will impact wages again. The president has made some big long-term bets on the economy in terms of immigration, deportations, and tariffs. They are building factories as we speak with the $20 trillion that he has brought here in investment. That has not yet shown up in a big way such that people know people who have gotten jobs in those factories. And it may not by the midterms.
Not just by the midterms, but it may not happen. It may not at all. Yeah. And that's so a couple of big political problems for Republicans. I think that they thought that the tax bill, for example, would be this sort of panacea. You give people a tax break, except that it's really the same tax level that they had before. So people are not going to experience it the same way. And then on top of that, he drops a bunch of tariffs on this economy. And I think that that is probably going to end up being a major miscalculation. I didn't even talk about healthcare. Healthcare being one of the big issues in this Tennessee race. They haven't even figured out if they're going to let people have premiums that skyrocket, double, triple what they were before. There are a lot of red flags going on.
10 days left
in the enrollment.
They haven't decided if they're going to let corporate welfare go to United Healthcare.
I'm just talking strictly politically in the sense that.
So we just heard that Costco is now suing the administration over the tariffs.
They are, yes.
Now, that's so interesting, Abby, because I have sat at this table so many times and been told that corporations are passing on those tariffs to consumers, and yet somehow Costco thinks it has standing to sue the administration for millions and millions of dollars.
Let me break it down.
Things can be true.
Both things can actually. Thank you. Both things can be true.
Tariffs. How could they possibly suing the administration?
Tariffs are a tax. Tariffs are a tax. Okay, corporations, they swallow some of it. They pass on some of it. But guess what? These corporations are also American companies. That is also hurting America. Whether you are taxing the consumer or you're taxing the corporation, and then they have to decide whether they pay their employees
I'm a leftist,
less,
so I
or whether
believe in taxing corporations. I think that's great.
I'm just saying that the tariff situation was a play that Trump made because he thought that everything was fine and dandy, that the economy was not on a razor's edge.
Watching Abby Phillip go back and forth with Batya Ungar Sargon here, you can really see the difference between someone grounded in data and someone trying to force a narrative. Batya keeps coming back to this idea that affordability is some kind of democratic illusion. But the problem with that argument is that it collapses under actual economic evidence. Independent analyses from Moody's, the IMF, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics all show the same trend. Real wages have risen over the last 2 years, especially for lower income workers. That's not partisan spin, that's math. And when Bhatia shifts to tariffs as if there's some heroic economic tool, that's where the wheels really come off. Trump's tariffs didn't magically strengthen American manufacturing. Research from the Federal Reserve found they destroyed more manufacturing jobs than they saved. And the fact that companies like Costco are suing the administration only proves the point. Tariffs don't just stick it to China. They hit American companies and American consumers first. Corporations don't eat the cost out of patriotism. They raise prices or cut labor to make up the difference. Abby's also right to point out that Republicans wildly misjudged how their tax policies would land. The 2017 tax law gave nearly all its benefits to corporations and the ultra-wealthy, while middle-class Americans saw cuts so small most people couldn't even feel them. That's literally why polls showed the majority of Americans think the GOP tax bill made their finances worse, not better. Bhatia talks vibes, Abby talks facts. It's not even close.
And it may turn out that that was a massive political mistake because the American people are saying everything that he has done thus far has not helped them.
I just wanted to go back a moment. You said a moment ago that President Trump kept the taxes where they were, and it wasn't a big tax cut. That has not been CNN's position for months. CNN said it was a big tax cut for the rich people. Most commentators on this network have said that. I made the point that this was merely stopping a tax increase, and you're not agreeing with me.
Let me clarify that, you know, the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, they had some choices that they faced. They could have
raised taxes or stopped.
They could have kept taxes the same for the vast majority of Americans, and they could have raised taxes for the wealthy. They chose not to do that. They decided to keep taxes more or less the same, but also cut spending in ways that cut what lower income Americans received from the government for their tax dollars, and use that transfer to fund the tax cuts for wealthy people. So look, you can call it whatever you want.
My only point is, but I want to put a pin in this.
But my only point is, Brad, I think that Mike Johnson and you and Donald Trump thought that, well, the American people are going to reward you for giving them those tax cuts. Well, it turns out they're not really going to give you a brownie for keeping things basically the same. They wanted things to improve, and it's not.
But Abby, if you think the economy is not what it ought to be now, you should have seen what would have happened if their taxes had gone up. Yeah, if Democrats tried to raise taxes on every American,
act as if this was you act as if this was a
Democrats had no plan. They had no plan to stop the tax increases for working people.
Kept taxes low for the vast majority of Americans, and
Democrats
they could have rolled back some tax cuts for the wealthy, and they chose not to do that. That was a choice. That was a policy choice.
Larger gap in America between the haves and have-nots right now. And the problem is that Donald Trump lives in a white billionaire bubble. And if you are a multimillionaire, if you are a billionaire, you're doing very well because the stock market, despite everything else that's going on, is going strong. But if you are one of the people who shops at Costco and goes home with 30 rolls of toilet paper and 20 pounds of ground beef, you are feeling it. And these people that Trump hangs out with on a daily basis, the billionaires in his cabinet, the billionaires at Mar-a-Lago, the billionaires that he invites to the White House, they are not feeling it.
It's pretty obvious Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro are operating in reality while Brad Todd is clinging to talking points that haven't matched economic facts for years. One of the biggest blind spots in Brad's argument is that he treats the Trump tax plan like it was some gift to everyday Americans. But every independent analysis from the Congressional Budget Office to the Tax Policy Center shows the same thing. The overwhelming majority of benefits went to corporations and the ultra-rich. Meanwhile, 80% of middle-class households saw tax cuts so small they couldn't even feel them. That's not a win, that's sleight of hand. And when Brad insists that Trump kept taxes low, he leaves out the part where the same law cut the earned income tax credits and child tax benefits for millions of low-income workers by limiting deductions and program funding. In other words, the people who needed help the most ended up with less. Anna's point about Trump living in a billionaire bubble is spot on. Under his administration, millionaire households saw their effective tax rate drop to its lowest level since the 1970s. That's why wealthy investors rode a bull market while working families got hammered by rising medical premiums, higher grocery bills, and inflated housing costs. And yes, Trump's tariffs made all of that worse. Multiple studies found Americans paid $57 billion in tariff-related costs, not China. Brad keeps arguing perception. Abby and Anna are pointing to reality, an economy where the richest Americans thrived while everyone else paid the price. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.